Hey guys, and welcome to part 4 to What a Female Naruto had ice release. If you want to know what happened in the last part, then there will be a link in the description down below, or you can watch this one all the way until the end, where then the on-screen cards will appear. With that out of the way, let's get into this. So, after Sakura had somewhat report to Tsunade that Sasuke had potentially been, kidnapped, she would call for Haku and Shikamaru. Haku being sort of tuning as she did promote Haku, and Shikamaru as he was the smartest person out of the the 9 graduates. And yeah, she would tell them, and that Haku would be the somewhat leader of the mission. That it'd be they'd figure it out that to be there for potentially the plan that to get the kidnapped Sasuke potentially back. And she'd end up telling them or suggesting to them to kind of bring Naruto as well. Which Shikamaru would somewhat be a bit confused, though Haku would somewhat nod and kind of understanding sort of why. And it'd pretty much be the the Sasuke retrieval mission, that canon team just plus Haku pretty much. And yeah, Sakura would sort of ask Naruto instead of always trying to get Naruto to promise her, she'd instead sort of ask Naruto to potentially try her best to bring Sasuke back. And yeah, and so they would sort of leave, and she Naruto self Sakura Naruto would be they wouldn't be confused. They would somewhat go and of course the team would end up splitting up like in canon, up to the point of where of course I can't remember his name, but the one with the bone Geki Genkai would sort of appear, of course, and Sasuke somewhat, or at least they'd fight the person all for about maybe 2 or 3 minutes, when Sasuke would end up getting out of the barrel, and he'd end up having not only cast mark stage 1 but also stage 2, so V1 and V2. And from of course, they would simply stop. They would look at him, and he would, and Bambash and simply tell him to, where to go to, or at least wouldn't tell him, Sasuke would already somewhat know where to somewhat go, as they'd told him, or at least they'd managed to, or at least, he'd jump back, he'd tell, Sasuke where to go, and from there, Sasuke would simply kind of sort of nod. They would somewhat, Haku and Naruto would kind of look at one another, and that would, tell him to, attack him or something, to which Sasuke would simply smirk and would proceed to do a similarly 180 from the person and run. Should be dumbfounded, and which that wasn't, the way to the village, to which he'd simply ignore her. Haku would tell Naruto to run after, sort of him, to which should be hesitant, though Haku would just have to do something that she, sort of got him, and would sort of remind her that they both could do, they were both, somewhat, they were both shinobi of ice, and that, or at least they were both shinobi of ice, and that, he's been fighting, Jonin and that a lot longer than she has. And somewhat would Larry sort of say, I should go fine, but you better, be alive. And she'd simply, and Haku would just nod and go, well, you better be as well. And from there, or at least though Naruto would sort of leave, kind of grumbling that the fox would, or at least that the last thing At least that the somewhat fox would probably let her die anyway, and she'd somewhat jump after Sasuke. And yeah, of course, somewhat it'd be, of course, sooner than, in canon, though still nonetheless Sasuke would end up stopping, at the Valley of the End. And yeah, from there the fight would initially somewhat go like in canon. Though before I get into something like that, we'll go back to Haku's fight. That somewhat, once which, Lee would still end up appearing like in canon, and you'd, try something, fighting as well, and getting, simply trying to take his medicine, but instead it'd be equal sake and would get drunk. And from there, of course, somewhat, after, somewhat they belong, or at least, fighting, somewhat together, Gaara would end up showing himself, and they would, fight, and eventually, he would end up, somewhat dying like he did in canon. And yeah, but they would somewhat end up accelerating his kind of death. And so they would end up somewhat realizing they have time. They would go to, try, somewhat to, assist Naruto in potentially capturing Sasuke. Yeah, though now back with Naruto and back some time. As I said, the initial fight would go somewhere like in canon up until the point where Sasuke would use, would enter, V1 curse mark stage. And then somewhat as he enter that, he would end up being sort of fast, he'd be fast enough that he'd end up Chidoring sort of Naruto. Of course, and it'd go right away, through her sort of arm, his shoulder blade, and she'd end up sort of falling into, backwards into the water. Sasuke would simply sort of smirk. And yeah, somewhat, Naruto could feel, or at least somewhat could feel the pains, it'd be incredibly strong, but it was starting to kind of fade. And also was starting to sort of understand it was also getting slowly harder and harder to think she was dying. And of course she would sort of go, no, she'd sort of end up having, somewhat a seemingly life flash before her eyes, and then all the sort of, loved ones. So, what's that name? I'm a Tucci, the Kamehameha squad, somewhat Kakashi, and, somewhat, the, would sort of flash through her sort of mind, and she'd snap her somewhat eyes open, and she'd go, and she'd somewhat scrape her teeth up. She'd, or at least somewhat a one good arm, as a somewhat deep arm that, Sasuke, so she'd go through it while the main artery was gone, bone was gone, as it went straight through, and so was somewhat feeling, and the tendons, that was pretty much useless. And yeah, so I'm somewhat, I'm not, going to die here, somewhat, somewhat to, bring Sasuke back, or to, beat him, whatever, or somewhat, would simply fire up, and shoot, somewhat the fox would go, or at least somewhat the nine-tailed fox would go, so a bloodline limit is finally fully awakened. Let's see how strong she is now. As she'd feel the pain almost fading, somewhat starting to fade almost even faster. She'd somewhat look down and would see it just somewhat bone almost form within all about 2 seconds. And so as the bone would form, so the arteries then should sort of gain feeling back in the arm, then movement, and then sort of the muscle would fully grow back, and then the skin, it looked like nothing ever happened, and she'd up on top of the water, which Sasuke would somewhat frown, and yeah, from there, those houses that her hair would go more violet. Well, pretty much like in the sort of picture, and yeah, of course, from there, Sasuke would, or at least somewhat, figuring that she, was maybe starting to use the fox chakra, or that, would run at her again, or at least would try and, somewhat, well, no, he'd somewhat, would start fighting again, and eventually you'd end up going into Cosmic V2, and so by this point, her somewhat chakra would, or at least somewhat, because she, or at least somewhat, she somewhat was almost bleeding, somewhat chakra, because she was somewhat, she was having a chakra colder than what it normally is, circulating through her body, which of course, somewhat would cool down her and sort of turn her, which would be getting even hotter due to the fact she was running, and she would be running faster than she'd ever had. So she was also using a wind, some manipulation to jump down the, to decrease the friction of some of the, and front of her to, decrease the friction on her so she could, go faster. And yeah, so though Sasuke would end up entering into, Cosmic, stage 2, V2, as he'd end up, trying, Chidori again, and he'd got her as fast as he possibly could, and she'd put up a sort of, ice wall to which he'd, as he'd stay that, that wouldn't stop him, and it would, his hand would only go halfway through it. And the ice would be a somewhat slightly more deeper blue than it normally was. Those who wouldn't pay attention too much, she wouldn't really pay any attention to somewhat of ice, and she just figured that it was due to the fact her body, she's running her chakra through her body at a colder temperature. And yeah, and somewhat the fight would carry on and go on, and eventually Sasuke would once more land another lucky Chidori, to which she wouldn't fall forward. He would watch. Sasuke would watch somewhat again. It would be instead it would be in the other somewhat kind of shoulder blade, and you'd see in kind of somewhat some level of rage, anger, and shock just the bone form than the artery and all that stuff before skin would grow back all like new. He'd rage would kind of build up within him, and that just wasn't dying, and eventually, they're somewhat like, or at least, their clash would somewhat finally end with her doing, Sangon, which would be more painful than it would be in canon, as he would end up having some, somewhat level of, damage, or at least even more damage than in canon. And yeah, he was about to do one final, Chidori, put somewhat at her abdomen, and more specifically where the woman would, sit, in a female, as he'd figured that she was now truly using fox chakra, or using a small amount of it, and that somewhat if he could, potentially somewhat fry it, that, he should never, should lose the ability to, have children, but he would end up hearing, sound that, the fights over, the, bridges over her, somewhat, here, and he'd, in someone realised that it was probably backup. He'd curse and he'd somewhat curse, and he'd realise that he'd better get going now, otherwise, he'd probably be fighting what sounded like maybe 4 or 5 on 1. And yeah, so those that one would end up dropping, and you'd end up leaving, and you'd end up just getting far enough away so they would appear, and the only thing they would see would be Sasuke's headband and Naruto, because they would somewhat somewhat being faster, shoot over, and said that she was alive, but they should get back to, Konoha, so they would. And yeah, the somewhat only, indication that she'd been, or at least that she'd, potentially lost any blood at all, was a dress being or at least a shinobi outfit being somewhat covered in blood. And yeah, mainly, the thing that went around her neck. Yeah, so though, or at least though, they'd end up coming across somewhat or at least halfway back, they would end up meeting with Kakashi, at which point, they would end up, they would, because guards set them down, and Kakashi, would ask if, Naruto's all okay and that, and it's, kind of asked where Sasuke was, to which they would, state that he was gone, and yeah, so just as somewhat, Pakken and Kakashi are about to go, it would start raining. And yeah, he'd somewhat Pakken would somewhat would apologize to Kakashi and state that now that it was raining, his scent would be somewhat washed out by the time they, got to the bridge and that, and it cast. Though Kakashi just nodded, thanked Pakken anyway, and he'd dispel. He'd pick up Naruto, and they would jump, they would go back to Konoha. Yeah, from there, because, they would end up, Kakashi would end up giving, Naruto over to Tsunade, who would, take Naruto in, would, check over her, and would realize that the only damage that she seemed to have no damage at all, and that, in the fact that she, that was the only sign that she could see that she'd been fighting was, again, besides from the blood, that could have been from her, and, there's something else, or that, was her incredibly dangerously low chakra reserves. And yeah, she'd, would somewhat be on Naruto or somewhat on a bed, and would take it somewhat into a room, telling, yeah. Though Kakashi and somewhat Haku would be there, Sakura, it'd be somewhat late enough that Sakura had gotten kind of home and bed, Tsunade ordering her to do so. Someone they would, ask kind of how she was, to it. Tsunade stated that she'd be fine when she wakes up, and that her waking up could potentially be any time between somewhat a week to a month. They somewhat look at her, and they would ask kind of why, to which she'd state that she just blown chakra. Kakashi would ask how low. So now they would simply say that if she tried molding chakra right now, she'd die. Kakashi would be shocked, and yeah, as to his knowledge, the funjutsu on his stomach or that, or what he could kind of get from it, she didn't necessarily, or at least should stop her from her reserves getting that low. And yeah, of course, somewhat Haku known about, or at least, Choku would be confused and go her, but what about if she had the Haku, to speak up and go, but how can that be Summer? Wouldn't the fox end up escaping? To which she'd go, no, of course you wouldn't know somewhat about, or at least some of the Nato's, or at least somewhat Cyril, or at least that it's kind of unique compared to the other somewhat Jinchuriki series, and that true for any other Jinchuriki, it would be true, and even the previous Jinchuriki, in fact, it would be of the 9 types, that would be true, that if they somewhat dropped below a certain amount of chakra, yeah, their tailed beast would be able to get the hell out of their, out of their body. But some of the fringes on Naruto's stomach is different, as it's the 8 trigram, I know it's 8 trigram tetragram cell. Pretty much, in other words, it allows the Fox's chakra to sort of naturally mix with Naruto's, pretty much granting probably higher healing ability in that. But also, slowly building up her somewhat immunity to its kind of corrosive nature. But also that the seal itself, when necessarily, the seal could run purely on the tailed beast's own chakra. That would leak through, would come through the seal. It could use the Fox's chakra to run the seal. Pretty much like the Fox was powering its own jail, pretty much. And yeah, I could be somewhat surprised, though it should, but there is a safety system from what I've seen kind of in place that it should stop her from going below a certain amount, or at least from losing a certain amount of chakra, that it should start injecting its own chakra into her. But the only way that wouldn't work is if her chakra's ability to suppress the actual Fox chakra had been increased drastically. If that to the point of where the Fox chakra that it did inject was just being suppressed and pretty much nullified. And as such, it's just the only thing I could think of. And yeah, from there, of course, all these they would speak for a bit. From there they would nod and yes, from there, about at least the same amount of time as in canon would go by, and she would end up waking up, and yeah, she'd seen her somewhat stuff, in a kind of hospital gown. She'd take that off to see she was naked, and that there was no bandage, inside of her body. And yeah, she'd allow a somewhat sigh, though there'd be a knock on the door, and she'd go up 1 minute as she'd quickly pull on the sort of thing, and just as she'd managed to get it down to a sort of belly button, the door would be thrown open. Now till you're awake. Damn it, I told you to wait a minute. She'd sort of yell out Sakura. And Sakura just like somewhat winces. She'd sort of turn to Sakura, and yeah, Sakura would somewhat be kind of frozen there for a few seconds, but would shake her somewhat the head and would somewhat kind of bit kind of scared and shakily walk in, and yeah, and I forgot his name. Shikamaru would walk in as well, and so would Haku, and they would speak for a bit, but eventually, Sanada would walk in, having them or at least, telling them to someone to leave. Actually, I had to check Naruto, someone out, make sure everything was okay. They would, and Sanada would pretty much somewhat know that she was all fine. Would proceed to, or at least would, somewhat ask her to, report. Which somewhat she would, and up until the point where she'd, state that she'd first started using sort of ice, that she would, tell Tsunade. So I'd be somewhat surprised in that, and would, and would kind of, say, but not a Yuki, you shouldn't have, the ice, bloodline limit. And she'd go, well, I don't think it's necessarily bloodline. What do you mean by that? She'd sort of say, Kakashi Sensei, I know you're outside the door, you can come in. The door would suddenly turn around, and the door would open to, lo and behold, Kakashi would step in. He'd on the back of his head and would slightly chuckle somewhat sheepishly. Though he would shut the door and he would somewhat forward to the other side of the hospital bed. As he would state that that ice release isn't that, or at least he'd say that, or at least that would come up with a theory. Somewhat that kind of all elemental, somewhat bloodline limits aren't actually bloodline limits, and or instead just kind of, somewhat elemental affinities, just higher level elemental affinities, and as such, they'd started sort of learning, and then a mission happened, as you'd know, the Land Waves mission. Should nod and state that the both of them had, had sort of taught her, had taught him after that how to actually to do ice, as you'd show Tsunade that he could produce a small amount of ice, and Tsunade would be kind of dumb, somewhat surprised in that, and Naruto would Tsunade would sort of ask her to, do, or at least would, kind of ask her to, do it as well, and she'd sort of try and do it to the same character, to the same sort of level as Kakashi, that just being, a normal ice cube, but instead it would reflect some amount of sort of, blue in it, which meant that it was denser, as water, reflects blue light. So the denser ice is the more somewhat light, or not only the more likely sort of the blue wavelength of light is to be reflected back, but of course higher the amount of blue light being reflected back. And so it'd look like a somewhat what a normal sort of eye, or at least her normal sort of ice look like when she'd be when she's somewhat fighting, when she'd just somewhat normally do it without thinking about the temperature or that. Yeah. Somewhat should be kind of, she'd sort of like a bit confused, and Kika should sort of, I thought you were just going to, sort of make like this, and she'd start trying to. Guess I just need to somewhat trying to make it somewhat. And got somewhat on a second try to be able to do it. And yeah, and from there she'd somewhat, the only thing that it meant to Kakashi was that her chakra had gotten denser. Well, not that, but or at least somewhat ice had gotten seemingly, stronger, seemingly. And yeah, so she'd sort of ask when, she'd been able to do that, which Kakashi, tell her that she'd understand, you should know this, especially if you've read something about that only the Kage, or at least the Kage of the village could read. She'd blink somewhat, she'd say that she'd be back in a minute or so, and a minute to a minute and a half later, she would sort of return and would after, or at least doing a few checks, would say that whatever blood, or at least, thing that was apparently deactivated here is now somewhat active. And yeah, anyway, from there, at least somewhat, she'd end up, or at least though, they would talk for a bit more, and yeah, from there, they would sort of leave, though Kakashi or at least would end up staying. Or at least though he'd sort of leave the room as Naruto would get up and get dresses. And yeah, about half an hour, or at least 30 seconds later, she'd, Kakashi would walk back in. And about 2 minutes later, Tsunade would come back and would somewhat come back and would proceed to promote Naruto to a chunin for so she'd been a bit hesitant, but with reporting on what actually somewhat happened, during the actual, fight against, Gardy Sansan invasion and that. And, learn about, how long she'd had ice, for, at least when she'd started messing about with it. Yeah. And so, from there, of course, there would be, driver wouldn't really show up. Or that, as they weren't on, great grounds or anything like that. And, of course, as such, she wouldn't really offer her a, somewhat, a 2-year, 3-year training trip. And yeah, anyway, though, from there, a year would go by as somewhat she'd been training with Kakashi, and eventually they did finish, somewhat wind manipulation, that, to which they'd then move on to, or they would end up moving on to fire manipulation, to which should do that, and also Earth, both level 1 and level 2 of kind of difficulty in that. And Kakashi had also gotten more proficient with making ice, being able to produce enough somewhat ice chakra to do somewhat kind of ice style, like somewhat Senbon, and also somewhat ice style ice wall. Not necessarily enough to do demonic ice mirrors just yet, but he was working up to that. And yeah, throughout that year, she'd end up asking potentially about learning how to do, the Chidori or that, which Kakashi would, someone tell her that she wouldn't be able to do it because of the Sharingan and that, and should point out that maybe, or at least that, if he were to go blind in that eye, he wouldn't be able to do it as well. All that, and that maybe there's potentially another way to do, the Chidori, or, his Raikiri or that. The Chidori without necessarily requiring the Sharingan, he'd facepalm himself. So kind of realizing that there probably was another way, a different, maybe lightning manipulations, way to actually do the Chidori. And yeah, so he still wouldn't necessarily teach her the Chidori, but he would, though they would somewhat test out a normal somewhat ice, kind of now normal kind of somewhat default ice, similarly like density in that. So it'd just be doing all these somewhat deep, all these. She would just do the focus and hand sign, and would sort of just do ice style ice somewhat wall. To it's a somewhat highly dense and somewhat thick somewhat ice wall would appear, so thick enough that it would look pretty much like the ice you can somewhat see around her in the somewhat picture, just that kind of blue colour. And yeah, from there, Kakashi would do some, would do his Raikiri, and he'd run at full speed as fast as he possibly could, and it'd be dense that his middle finger and then the finger either side of his middle finger, so pretty much his only 3 fingers would pretty much be somewhat poking just barely through, and that it stopped his Raikiri and S-rank jutsu, and that if it could stop that, then Sasuke wouldn't even stand a chance against against her, and that was true. When Sasuke tried doing the Chidori a kind of second time, she'd made an ice wall, and Sasuke's Chidori had broken through halfway through the ice wall, showing that it was a lot denser than before. And yeah, of course, somewhat this, somewhat ice wall was even a lot more denser than that. And yeah, not only that, but she'd shown somewhat her healing ability by just grabbing or at least a kunai stabbing right the way through her arm using some manipulation that had gone right the way through, poking out the other side of her somewhat shoulder, and would sort of rotate it to enlarge the hole. It'd drop out, and she'd let she'd put the kunai out, letting it drop to the floor, and Tsunade and Kakashi would just stare down each other because they could see right the way through. Not only that, but should just be, blood would be, kind of just somewhat pouring out at a kind of fast rate. She'd pierce through a artery, and that hand that was kind of somewhat upright had fallen to the side as it was just, she couldn't feel anything from there, and she'd proceed to rapidly, she'd send, Chakra to it, and they'd watch within all but 2 to 3 seconds. Her arm would be back to how it was all but 4 seconds ago before she'd pierced it with a kunai. And yeah. And so Kakashi started to realize that she'd be, if she could use the, Fox's Chakra, she'd practically be immortal, pretty much. At that, rate of speed that she could take a sword to the heart, could pull it out, and the heart would continue to function as the muscles and that would be all healed up in all but barely a microsecond, all that, and being a probably important organ, and she would state that she could potentially heal it up even faster. That, yeah, she would pretty much be immortal. The only way potentially that she could potentially die would be to cut off her head, and to pretty much cut off her head at such a speed that she couldn't react, that her healing ability couldn't react, and that if you tried killing her, normally or with a guillotine or that, so it did. But yeah, guillotine would definitely kill her as it blocks. So that. Though then again, she could just do ice and it wouldn't be able to. Especially someone as Kakashi, someone or at least was curious on her ability throughout the year to see if she could, if potentially any, somewhat level of, chakra suppression would work, and, well, it kind of somewhat didn't. It may and should somewhat grumble that it was harder to do so, but pretty much when she tried and do somewhat ice around her neck, a just big chunk of ice would appear instead. Which showing that it just made it harder for her to control her chakra, and that it pretty much wouldn't be impossible, and she would manage to somewhat, or at least she would manage to pretty much free the metal down to such a cold temperature that she'd just easily snap the chain in the middle and would snap the somewhat part, or at least would somewhat snap it, and would, get her somewhat hands, free from it, and her chakra control would return, and she'd be able to, mount the chakra around her neck. Chakra ice around her neck. And yeah, pretty much that. Then Kakashi knew that pretty much, well, yeah, that was pretty much almost no way that she would probably die, as, if somebody tried, cutting her head off with a sword, it would just go through, and as it would go through her neck, her skin would be healing itself. And so, as such, it wouldn't be, somewhat, it, wouldn't be, a sudden, it wouldn't be, chop off head, now dead. It'd be, somewhat a swing, and somewhat as the blade would, come out the other end, the skin would be somewhat, would be healing up from it. And yeah, the only thing she probably may experience would be for all but a few milliseconds to a few microseconds at most, would be a tiny bit of numbness, complete body numbness before it would fully, before, it would fully come back. And yeah. And yeah. Though, anyway, as I said, the year would go by, and somewhat sooner they would end up promoting her and Haku to Jonin due to just and that's the thing, they still couldn't really think of why Sasuke would go to Orochimaru, as he was getting stronger. Hell, he was the strongest getting out of his graduating year. He was the strongest male that was, and that he was already at Chunin level, kind of, that Kakashi was going to potentially ask, maybe after maybe 2 more, maybe some B ranks, potentially for potentially maybe A rank for his team, but yeah, as he did believe his team had what it was somewhat in them now to do an A rank mission. But Sasuke simply wanted to go to Orochimaru in that, and yeah, Kakashi was now very much truly a S rank shinobi, with Naruto being A rank in that, and from there I'm gonna end this part here, guys. So if you have enjoyed this part, do tell me in the comments down below, and hope you guys and girls have a good day or night, depending on wherever you are and whenever you watch this, and good bye.